All right, strap in, everybody, because this deep dive might get a little bumpy.
Yeah, this one's definitely intense.
You guys sent in a YouTube transcript about the hostage situation in Gaza, and wow.
Yeah.
Some strong opinions.
Very strongly worded, very strong opinions.
Yeah, about a very sensitive situation.
It is. It is.
So you ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay, so what I found really interesting about this transcript is how it frames two very different approaches.
Right?
To the hostage crisis.
Yeah, almost like two opposite ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah, hard power versus
diplomacy.
Diplomacy, yeah.
And using this to kind of look at those two approaches.
Yeah, and it really doesn't pull any punches when it comes to Trump's stance.
No, it does not.
I mean, the language is
very direct.
Yeah, brutal hell.
Brutal hell
was the one that really jumped out at me.
Right.
If those 101 hostages aren't released by January 20th, 2025, and the transcript seems to be presenting this as like a message of deterrence.
Right. A very clear message.
But is it really that straightforward?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, is it really just that simple?
Yeah.
The transcript seems to frame it as kind of classic Trump, right? Power play, intimidate Hamas into action.
Yeah.
But then what's interesting is how it contrasts that with Biden's approach.
Really?
It's like the complete opposite.
Yeah. And there are definitely some criticisms in there.
Oh, yeah.
Suggesting that Biden calling for ceasefires and negotiations is like a sign of weakness.
Yeah. Not a strongman approach.
Yeah.
Not at all.
And it even implies that some of the things that Biden has done, like the pressure on Israel and his reported demands to spare Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in opposition to a ground invasion, that those were actually counterproductive.
So that's a pretty big claim.
Yeah.
It really raises the question about, like, are these strategies effective in a situation like this? You know, you have one side that's like unwavering strength.
Right.
And, overwhelming force, that peace through strength kind of idea.
Yeah.
But then you have the other side saying, no, we need to talk this out. We need to negotiate.
Right.
Find some common ground.
Right.
Even if it's with people that we, see as enemies or who we disagree with strongly.
So where does that leave us?
It's tough, right? Because it's one right and one wrong.
Right.
Or is it more nuanced than that?
Yeah. Is it that simple?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's definitely more complicated than just a simple yes or no.
Right.
I mean, this transcript, even though it's definitely presenting one specific point of view,
right,
it does give us a chance to think about what could happen if we take either approach.
Right. Like, what are the potential consequences?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, what if Trump's approach actually escalates the situation?
Right.
And makes it more dangerous for the hostages? Or could Biden's more diplomatic approach actually lead to, a more peaceful outcome, even if it takes longer?
Right. Even if there are concessions.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we can't forget about the human side of this whole thing.
Oh, of course not.
The transcript does a good job of reminding us of the terrible things that these hostages are going through.
It
talks about baby Seaver.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Who was kidnapped before he even turned 1.
It's just heartbreaking.
And then Aiva Siegel.
Right.
Who's 63 and had to endure those horrible conditions in the tunnels.
Horrible.
These aren't just political pieces on a chessboard.
No, they're people.
They're real people.
With families.
With families who desperately want them home.
Yeah, it's easy to lose sight of that sometimes.
And then there's the fact that the transcript mentions that some of the hostages have been executed.
Oh, I don't know how many.
Right, the exact number is unknown.
Right.
But just knowing that that has happened.
Yeah, it just adds to the tragedy.
Yeah.
The urgency of the situation.
Absolutely.
And you know what else is really interesting in this transcript?
What's that?
So it mentions that Trump's brutal hell comment, it came right after he had dinner with Benjamin Netanyahu's wife and son at Mar-a-Lago.
Oh, wow.
Sarah Netanyahu.
At Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, and apparently they talked a lot about the hostage situation.
So what do you make of that?
Well, think about it.
Well,
Trump could be back in the White House in 2025.
Right.
So maybe this dinner was like a preview.
A preview of what?
Of a Trump-Netanyahu alliance.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe they'll work together on this issue.
Okay, so we could be looking at a very different approach. From a second Trump administration.
Potentially, yeah.
Than what we're seeing now.
Yeah.
But, like you said before,
yeah,
the big question is, what are the consequences?
Of each approach.
Of either approach.
Exactly.
Like, what's going to bring those hostages home safely?
Right.
And also address this larger conflict.
That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the real question.
It's not an easy one.
It's not. And it's something we need to keep digging into.
Yeah, definitely.
This transcript is a good starting point.
It is. It is.
But there's so much more to unpack here.
Yeah, a lot more layers to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really is like two sides of a coin.
Right.
Each side has its own like potential risks and benefits.
Right.
You know, it kind of reminds me of the Iranian hostage crisis back in '79.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, that went on for over a year.
It did.
With a mix of diplomacy and then eventually like a daring rescue mission.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Because it shows just how complex these situations can be.
They really are.
There's no easy answer.
No.
No perfect playbook.
Nope.
And every decision.
Carries so much weight.
Yeah.
And it's even more complex in this case.
How so?
Well, because you have the whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict layered on top of it. Decades of struggle.
Right.
Deep historical roots.
Yeah, it's so easy to just focus on the hostage situation itself.
Right, the immediate crisis.
Immediate crisis, yeah.
But we can't ignore the bigger picture.
The underlying issues.
Exactly. The things that contribute to this cycle of violence.
Yeah, and this transcript does a good job
It does.
of reminding us of that.
Even though it's focusing on Trump's statement
Right.
and these different approaches,
Right.
it's also like a little nudge
Okay.
to remind us to zoom out
Okay.
and look at the bigger picture.
What do you mean?
Well, like, what are the root causes of this conflict?
Okay.
What's the international community's role in all of this?
Right.
And the most important thing,
What's that?
how do we achieve lasting peace?
Yeah. Are we at a crossroads?
Maybe?
Yeah.
I mean, do we go with the hardline stance?
To show force?
Yeah.
Or
Or do we focus on diplomacy?
Right. Even if it means engaging with groups that we might not agree with.
Exactly.
And those aren't easy choices.
Not at all.
The stakes are incredibly high.
Incredible.
Not just for the hostages and their families,
Right.
but for the entire region.
The whole world, really.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It is.
And it makes you realize how connected everything is.
Absolutely.
Decisions made in Washington,
Is Jerusalem.
Yeah.
They all have ripple effects.
Yeah.
They affect everyone.
not just the people directly involved.
Right, the whole global community.
And speaking of actions having consequences, you, our listeners, are actually a big part of our story here at Standing in the Gaps.
That's right.
We love bringing you these deep dives,
That's
these
it.
explorations into these really complex and challenging topics.
Absolutely. It's our passion.
It is. But we also know that we have limitations.
Yeah, we do.
Our equipment, it gets the job done.
It does.
But it's holding us back
In some ways, yeah.
from reaching a wider audience.
Yeah.
And from producing the kind of high-quality show that we envision.
The show we know we can make.
Exactly. Like, we're talking better webcams,
Oh, yeah.
so you guys can actually see our faces.
Right now it's a little grainy.
Yeah.
Haha. Studio quality microphones.
Yes, please.
So you don't have to strain to hear us.
Yeah, no more 1080 audio. And faster editing computers
Ooh, yeah, that'd be nice.
to make the whole process smoother and more efficient.
More efficient.
And we really believe that these upgrades,
They'll make a huge difference.
Yeah.
We could reach so many more people.
right,
And share these important conversations.
with a broader audience.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why we launched a GoFundMe campaign
We did.
to help us bridge that gap.
Between where we are now
Right.
and where we want to be.
And every little bit helps.
It really does.
Every contribution
No matter how small.
will go directly towards upgrading our equipment.
And improving the quality of the show.
We are so grateful for your support,
We are.
and we hope you'll consider joining us on this journey.
Yeah, come along for the ride.
The link to our GoFundMe is in the show notes.
But check it out.
But getting back to this transcript, it doesn't just focus on the political side of things. It also highlights the personal stories of the hostages.
Yeah, it's easy to forget when we're talking about all this like high-level stuff.
Right, policy and strategy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But those stories really bring it home.
They do.
You know, Baby Seaver or Eva Siegel,
Oh,
all the
I-
others who are still being held.
Right.
It reminds us that this isn't just some political game. It's about real people
Real life.
and real suffering.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how effective any approach can be if it doesn't put the safety of the hostages first.
Absolutely.
Like, is a hardline stance really the best way to get them back?
Right. Or could it make things worse?
Yeah, could it backfire?
Yeah. And that's a tough question to answer.
It is.
There are good arguments on both sides.
Right.
And it's really hard to say what the outcome of each approach will be.
Right, but I think this transcript really forces us to confront that.
Yeah, the uncertainty.
Yeah.
To really think about how complicated this is.
And how much weight these decisions carry.
Exactly.
And it's so much bigger than just Trump versus Biden
Oh, yeah. Way bigger.
or hard power versus diplomacy.
It's about history, ideology.
Geopolitics.
It's all tangled up together.
Yeah, it's messy.
Very messy.
And that's kind of the main takeaway here.
What do you mean?
That we can't simplify this conflict.
Right. No easy answers.
Yeah.
No sound bites.
We have to pay attention.
Think critically.
Engage with all the nuances.
Yeah, all the uncertainties
that come with these types of situations.
So where do we go from here?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, this transcript gives us a glimpse of what the future might hold.
Right.
But it leaves us with a lot of unanswered questions.
Like, will Trump coming back mean a more aggressive approach?
Like the transcript suggests.
Yeah. Or will we continue to see diplomacy as the main strategy?
Even if it's not easy.
Even with all the roadblocks.
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But we can use this information,
right,
these different viewpoints, these potential scenarios,
yeah,
to really understand the situation.
To have better conversations.
More productive conversations.
Yeah, about the way forward.
Exactly.
That's the key.
And you know what?
What's that?
This deep dive hasn't given us all the answers.
No, not at all.
But it's given us a lot to think about.
It has.
And that's what these conversations are all about.
Right. Challenging our assumptions.
Expanding our perspective.
Encouraging us to dig deeper.
Yeah, to keep asking those tough questions.
Just never stop learning.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep exploring.